Hey guys, you are checking out the 5-minute interview on episode 45. We are with special guest Steve Carlisi, who is known to pretty much everyone as Steve C. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, dude? How are you?
I'm really doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I'm living in Scranton, Pennsylvania right now.
Yeah, when did this happen?
It happened, well, the chronology was, let's see.
Why don't we just take a step back and actually let everyone who doesn't know who you are? I mean, you were known to everyone in the Opie and Anthony world as Steve C, but you were known from the Foundry Music, which you still have, correct?
Yep, still up and running,
and
in a much less complicated form, but yeah, it's still up and running.
So how did you actually hook up with Opie and Anthony?
Well, I got a broadcasting and film degree from Boston University, and when I was in college, my job, my job to pay for my spending money was I was a bouncer. I worked security at events, and while Opie and Anthony were at WAAF, some of the events I would work were what they would call these indoor beach parties that they would host. And they would have everyone on stage from Powerman 5000 to Korn and Ministry, I think, and a bunch of other bands. And I would, do security for those things. And that's how I indirectly met them, just as one of the guys that worked their shows. And I was a fan of their shows up there. And it just so happened that they got fired for the mayor bit, for telling the people that the mayor died right around the time that I moved back to the New York, New Jersey area, because I was in a band, Foundry, that, it basically wasn't going anywhere because we were in Boston. And if you want a band to go somewhere, and if you want any kind of success in the music business, you had to be in New York, Los Angeles, or Nashville. And none of the guys I was in the band with wanted to move. So I said, well, screw this. I'm moving. I'm broke. I have to move back to New Jersey and live in my mother's basement.
Awesome.
And that's what happened. It just so happened I was working some odd job, working security at a retail store, and I heard them on the radio on WNEW, and I hit them up, and I said, "You guys might not remember me. You might not. You may remember me, but here's who I am. Here's what I've done. Can you use somebody like me on staff?" And they called me in for an interview, and they said, "Well, what can you do?" And I gave them my resume, and I gave them my list of credentials, and they said, "Oh, okay, we know who you are." I said, "I can do websites." And they said, "Well, why don't you continue on what you're doing?" Because at the time I was doing these daily recaps of the Opie and Anthony show on Foundry Music.
Okay.
And just as a fan of the show, not really thinking it was going to lead to anything.
Yeah.
But it ultimately wound up getting me a job as their production director, or as the production director at WNEW when Psycho Mark got himself fired.
Mm-hmm.
And Psycho Mark was just one of the other characters that was on the show. And when that vacancy opened up, Opie was the one that said, "Well, take a look at this Steve guy. He's a radio guy." At the time I was working as an oldies jock in North Jersey and cutting my teeth there. Not that I really loved being an oldies jock, but it was, when you work in this business, you have to take the jobs that you can get. And I got hooked up with Opie and Anthony that way, and I worked the regular job, the regular production job from 9 to 5, and then every hour after that, I worked with Opie and Anthony.
So you were pretty much you were getting paid directly from NEW during that whole period when they were doing the afternoon drive, and I mean, they were at this point. I mean, they were huge. I mean, especially with a lot of this stuff. I mean, they were what to listen to, and for a lot of guys, like, for us, well, it was really the best of both worlds. You got to listen to Howard in the morning still, and then on the drive home, you listen to O&A, and it was great. And I mean, some of the best radio came out of the NEW, and
that was before that was before all of the FCC complaints and the FCC mandates came down. It was a bullet train. Nobody really had put their foot down in terms of the rules. that we had to adhere to. And the rules were coming not from necessarily the FCC, but from the company, who didn't want to get themselves fined. So,
were you writing any stuff? I mean, probably their biggest. I mean, the Sex for Sam was probably, to this day, next to the Boston mayor thing, their biggest. I don't know if you want to call it a fuck up, but I mean, it was a fuck up that made them huge. But I mean, did you have anything to do with writing any of this stuff or putting bits?
I didn't. No, the stuff that I wrote was primarily the production stuff, like the Jim Norton, the Jim Norton doll bit, stuff that wound up on Norton CDs. I wrote a lot of that pre-recorded stuff where you took audio from the show and rearranged it and made it into these little these comedy pieces. That was the stuff I was doing.
Because it was, I mean, the thing about, I mean, for us as a fan, and I mean, you went from, was it like an overnight thing? I mean, you went from being a fan yourself to, you became essentially a character on their show. I mean, everyone knew you as much as anyone knew anyone else on the show. I mean, you became part of the show.
I don't, it's flattering to hear that. I never thought of myself as anything more than just a lucky schmuck who got himself in riding the right coattails. I remember one time somebody tried to bait me by saying, well, Steve, you're a celebrity now, so certain things don't apply to you. And I looked at him and I said, bullshit. I'm no more of a celebrity than you do. And this is somebody that worked on the show at the time. And I said, I'm no more of a celebrity than you are. You're just another lucky putz like me.
I mean,
who happens to have a cool job that, that could end at any time.
Even to this day, I mean, they were busting on you today. Even, I mean, they were still doing something came up where I don't remember what it was, but they were like, yes, and they did their whole Steve C bit, and it was and they went on for like 5-10 minutes, and then so here they are, NEW. Then from there, they're done. They're out of NEW, and then there was the break, and then, as far as everyone knew, Opie and Anthony were gone. They were done. There was no more Opie and Anthony. And then I don't remember what the venue was, but I think Jimmy Norton announced somewhere that O&A were going to Sirius. Now, did you know that you were still going to be part of this? You were still doing their website stuff? Or did you just think that was it? You had to look for a new job?
I was the only one that didn't get fired from the NEW regime because I was not a direct member of the Opie and Anthony show. I was paid by NEW to do production.
Okay.
So the thought process, at least to my way of thinking, was you can't fire the production guy just because he's friendly with Opie and Anthony.
Sure.
And
that's
why. Go ahead.
I mean, were you like friends with these guys or friendly? Did you consider them friends?
Of course, and I still do.
Okay.
Of course, and I stayed in contact with everybody through that time, and they were still getting paid through that time that they were off the air.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the deals were with the support staff. I don't know how long their severance deals lasted. I just wasn't privy to that information, but I know that in order to keep them off the air and off the competition, that CBS paid them out the remainder of their contract, and that's why they were off the air for so long. And I was out looking for other jobs actively because I didn't want to be the production guy for Blink and Mix 1027 and Fresh 1027 and all the permeations of all these different stations that WNEW was going through. It wasn't what I wanted.
It wasn't for you, exactly.
It just wasn't what I envisioned myself doing. And I was about to sign a contract with John DeBella, the old zookeeper in Philly.
Philly, yep.
And I called Opie and I said, "Listen, dude, I'm going to sign this contract unless you tell me otherwise." And I think his words were, "Don't sign anything. We're going to XM. You're coming with us."
Awesome.
And I called up the guy I called up John DeBella. I graciously declined the offer, and I said, I can't tell you why, but no thanks. And I think maybe 48 hours later, they made the announcement that they were going to XM and that they were bringing me with them. So that was cool.
And then at that point, what was your actual job title? Now, at this point, were you working for XM, or were you going to be part of them?
I was working for XM. Opie, Anthony, and Jim were independent contractors. The rest of us on the staff were all XM employees. So, and that's generally the way it works in this business. Unless you're a Howard and
Gotcha.
you get $100 million, and that $100 million is used to pay your entire staff, and everybody works for the Howard Stern Company.
Now, a lot of this stuff with Howard, I mean, I know there was always this tension. I know there was a lot of things that Opie would bring up, a lot of things Anthony would bring up, and then Howard never really talked about O&A on the air too much. I mean, was a lot of this shit radio stuff, or was there a real tension? Was there a real animosity? I know the stories Opie would always say, "Oh, I swear to God, what was your reaction?
Was the tension real, is what you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, was this really a problem?
I think in the beginning, I think there was real tension. I think when they first got to New York at NEW, they knew they couldn't shit in Howard's backyard, because Howard owned New York and you didn't want to piss him off. But I really wish I could remember what the circumstances were, but he said something negative about them, and that's when the animosity really started between the two camps. At this point, I really don't know what the relationship is between those two, but maybe they peacefully coexist. I'm not really sure, but yeah, there was a lot of, but the animosity between, at least the personalities between Opie, Anthony, and Howard was genuine. Mm-hmm. They really didn't like one another. I think they both both camps accused the other of ripping off bits from each other, and and taking material and stealing guests and cock blocking certain guests, which did happen. There were certain guests where we would find out after the fact that we didn't get a certain guest, or we didn't get a Kid Rock or somebody of that caliber because somebody over at K-Rock had said, bullshit, you're not getting them.
And something like this, I just even heard Mark Maron had Jimmy Kimmel on a few weeks back, and Kimmel even said that this is something that Leno has been doing to him, for years when he was first kicking off in the late night, that Leno was definitely doing that. You do Kimmel, you're not doing my show, and this is and he did a lot of politics. And you sit there and you go, wow, man. You see these guys on TV, you hear them on the radio, and they try to come off as your friend, and this is my buddy on the radio and stuff. And in the back, it's like you're going, wow, this guy's a fucking prick. This guy's a real dickhead that he's trying to stick it to a guy who's, trying to make it in the same business. And
show business is a shitty, competitive, dog-eat-dog business.
Yeah.
And anybody that has any illusions otherwise is just fooling themselves.
So you get yourself all set. You guys get all set over in XM, and then you have the big merger. Now, where are you now with your career? What's your job title? What's the highest ranking that you got over there?